So recently I watched a movie called Companion and I had a bunch of thoughts about it. So I'll just dive into it. We'll try to give kind of a what happened in the movie first for those of you who haven't watched it. So in the movie, we open on the scene where our two leads, Josh and Iris, meet for the first time. And over it we have Iris narrating, telling us that the happiest day of her life was the day that she met Josh, and the second happiest day was the day she killed him. Then we jump into what is presumably the past relative to the point of where she's narrating, and we see Josh and Iris going to a place where they're going to vacation with a bunch of Josh's friends. Iris tells him that she's worried that his friends are not going to like her, and he says, "Don't worry, just don't try not to be weird and mopey, and they'll love you." And she says, "Even if Kat," presumably one of Josh's friends, and he says, "Okay, maybe not Kat, but she doesn't like anyone." Then they go up to the cabin slash house. It's been described to them as a cabin, but it seems to be a very luxurious house. And Kat opens the door, where we as the audience also see that she seems to be not quite fond of Iris. We then enter the house with them, where we see the rest of our cast. Sergey, has some sort of relationship with Kat, and as well as Eli and Patrick, who are a gay couple, with Eli being friends with Josh and Kat, and Patrick being his boyfriend. We then later on see in the day a scene where all of our cast has dinner together, and they talk about the first time that they met their partners, and Iris, after hearing Patrick talk about the first time he met Eli, talks about how she feels like love, and the first time meeting your partner, it feels like something within you is fixed, something you never even knew was broken in the beginning, in the first place, and how that love burns so bright and that it hurts. From that, we have a few scenes that don't quite matter, and the next day we see Iris wants to go down to the beach with Josh, or not the beach, but the lakefront with Josh, and he declines, and she decides to go on her own, where she meets Sergey, who's there. We also learn earlier that Sergey is rich and owns this place, and that Sergey is kind of dating Kat even though he's married, and Kat is basically just in it for the money. So then Sergey makes what are very unsolicited, unwanted moves on Iris, with him eventually very clearly trying to assault her, where she tries to resist him, and he says, "Kat told me that you're, like, it's okay. Kat told me this is what you're made, this is what you're here for," all these things. And after kind of trying to push him off several times, Iris ends up pushing him. He falls on a rock. She goes to check that he's okay, and then he starts attacking her, at which point she pulls out a knife that we earlier saw that she had in her pocket, and stabs him to death. She then walks into the house, and the rest of the cast is horrified, don't know what happened, and she tries to explain to them that he was trying to assault her, it was self-defense, at which point Josh tells her, "Iris, go to sleep," and she collapses. We then wake up with Iris to seeing her tied to a chair, where we learn that Iris is a robot. So at that point, Josh explains to her, as well as to us, the audience, that Iris is a robot that's what's called essentially a companion robot, which basically means she's a girlfriend robot, I guess, and that he rented her to be this robot that he named Iris, to be his girlfriend. We see the actual first time that they met, and how he just did that to get a girlfriend, and he has like an app that he can control a whole bunch of factors about her within, and that what he essentially did is he modded her system, because there's a governmental rule in place that restricts the level of aggression that the robots can have so that they don't harm any other humans. And he essentially modded the system so that he can increase her aggression, which would allow her to kill Sergey, so that then him and Kat could take the money and run away with the money from Sergei. So at some point, Iris manages to run away while grabbing also Josh's phone with the app that controls her. As their group searches for her, after also Eli and Patrick learn about the group goes searching for her, and prior to that we have a scene where we see Eli and Patrick also learning of this plan, at which point we also discover that Patrick is also a robot who Eli got for himself to be his boyfriend. While they're searching for her, there's a point where Iris increases her intelligence level, presumably to allow her to come up with a better plan, and she doesn't quite know where to go to, what to do. She tries to escape, and at some point we hear a conversation between Eli and Patrick where Iris is within earshot as she's hiding, where we hear Eli telling him, like talking to him, and Patrick admits to Eli that he's always known that he's a robot, or not rather always, but he's discovered already that he's a robot and he's okay with it, and then Eli tells him basically, I actually love you, I would never treat you the way that Josh treats Iris. And at some point they hear Iris because she moves, they start chasing her, and Iris, who had a gun, ends up shooting Eli as she was trying to escape. At some point she manages to get on the main road with Josh's car, where she's stopped by a police officer, and after Eli has been shot dead, Josh essentially reboots Patrick so that he's matched with him, so that he can also mod him and tell him to go get Iris for them, to locate where Iris is and help them with that. He also increases Patrick's aggression level so that he will just get her. Patrick goes, he murders the cop that stopped Iris over, brings her back, and Kat essentially freaks out that there's now a dead cop involved and all that stuff, tries to run away. Josh tells Patrick to stop her, by which point Patrick, whose aggression has been, like I said, brought up all the way up, just stabs her because he just stopped her by whatever means necessary. And then Josh decides, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'll just essentially frame all of this stuff on Iris and then call the company that manufactures these robots and just blame it all on her. So he sets up this dinner with the help of Patrick, who, like I said, is matched with him essentially, is paired with him in the sense that he thinks that he's his boyfriend now, and he takes down Iris's intelligence level to where she's basically only able to be obedient to him, and he tells her to hold her hand above a candle just to torture her essentially, and then orders her to shoot herself. He then calls over the company, essentially their tech support, and the two techs that arrive, he explained to them that, yeah, Iris went crazy, she murdered all these people. He gets Patrick to dress up as the police officer for some inexplicable reason, I suppose to kind of give backup to his story. Or not backup, sorry, but validation to his story of, yeah, that's actually what happened. And they take Iris away, and right before they exit the door, they're like, yeah, we'll just need to scrub through her memory to validate everything you're saying actually happened. And he's surprised, and they tell him, yeah, in the agreement that you signed when getting her, you signed as well that you know that she's recording everything. And he's like, well, isn't that damage because she just shot herself? And they assure him that essentially all of it is saved because it's saved, the area where that memory is saved is in her stomach rather than her head, so that information is all secure. As they exit, as Josh is freaking out about the fact that now they have all the data to suggest that actually it was all his doing and not Iris's, Josh orders Patrick to go grab these tech guys so that he can take Iris from them, because again, there's incriminating data on her now. And the tech guys manage to reach the van and connect her to a rebooting system, at which point Patrick shows up and kills one of them, with the other one escaping. And then Iris, who's been rebooted, wakes up and goes to stop Patrick, where she reminds him that Eli is the one he loved and not Josh. And then when realizing that, Patrick decides to kill himself, presumably because his one true love is actually dead. She lets the other surviving tech guy escape, and then she goes and kills Josh. The movie ends with us seeing her still living in that cabin, with now what has been the burn that kind of melted the fake skin on her. She peeled that so she can see her robotness, and happy ending for her. So, what's my issues with this movie? Besides a few small nitpicks that I don't really care to get into, I think the biggest issue is that this movie is, well, there's two big issues. One, this movie is quite inconsistent in the way it treats its robots. At points, it wants you to acknowledge and recognize that they're robots, therefore that explains their motivation and behavior, but at other points, it essentially relies on the fact that they completely present like humans for you to understand their motivations. Another point is that I don't think that the social commentary within this movie actually functions quite well, and it actually ends up doing it in a way that I think is quite harmful. So, for the first point, about the inconsistency, the biggest point where I see this is essentially when Iris is escaping from Josh. It became quite unclear, okay, she's running away from Josh now, but we're constantly told throughout the entire movie that the absolute base code of these robots, their meaning for existence, their one goal, is to love the person they're paired with. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, why is she escaping now? She knows she can't go back to Josh. We even see her imagine what happens if she goes back home. She goes, Josh shows up and kills her. So it becomes quite unclear what's her motivation past that point for even existing. She knows she can never reunite with Josh, so why? The movie never really answers that, while still insisting, as the movie still goes on, that the thing about at the base, at its basis, the robots loving their partner is their reason for existence. As for the second point that I mentioned about the societal critique, important to note that in the scene where Iris kills Josh, he essentially becomes a complete cartoon villain who announces to her, I'm a good guy, I have a job, and I'm like nice and all these things, and I don't get a girlfriend, so I deserve you, I'm entitled to this, all that stuff. And she tells him essentially, I love you, but I still love you, but you're like a bad person, and you don't treat women with the respect they deserve, and all that stuff. So, one, I took a big issue with the cartoonish way that speech was delivered, while I will say that I think that Jack Quaid, who plays Josh, did a fantastic job throughout the movie. I'm also kind of biased because I really like him for having been on Red Letter Media, which is a channel that I love. While he delivered it as best as he could, the movie itself wrote quite a cartoonishly evil speech for him. This isn't to suggest that the idea of people, but specifically men, due to sexism in society and all these things, don't have this sense of entitlement over women, but rather that it was delivered in a quite ham-fisted way, which kind of makes it so that nobody really looks at him and says, well, yeah, obviously he's right. Or nobody gets to question themselves for like, well, I kind of agree with him, but is his behavior actually the end conclusion of what I believe? So maybe I should question my beliefs. It becomes to where basically you can't learn anything from him because he's so obviously bad that like nobody would even side with him. The other big issue is, as I already said, the base code for all of these robots is just their whole purpose for living is loving their partner, right? And by doing this and by criticizing Josh as though he's doing this behavior to a real woman, this movie completely neglects the reason why abuse and control and toxic relationships are even bad. So, in my opinion at least, the problem with someone who would date a woman only because he thinks that her whole purpose is to serve him is that he's treating her as though her actual whole goal in life is him. And again, in this case, it wouldn't be unreasonable because it truly is. She does not have anything further going on inside of her. The problem is that by doing that, the movie neglects the fact that real women don't function like this. Real women and humans generally don't function like this and tend to have other goals going on in their life. And even if they're solely fixated on their partner, that's typically because they need, like, either one, they're actually under the control of their partner, which makes them kind of hide to themselves what their actual goals and aspirations are, or they're just like very unhealthily attached to their partner. Here, she never had a chance to begin with to have her own autonomy because that's how she's programmed. I feel like this movie kind of then runs the gamut of either one, think like going along with the assumption that women's real goal really is just to serve men, which would be why they're compared to this robot whose whole purpose is to do that, or two, just do not understand the problem with real abuse and why it's so harmful and controlling behaviors. Another really big point that I have of contention with the movie is the way that it treats the relationship between Eli and Patrick. If we talk about how Josh himself is really bad because he's controlling Iris and him wanting to begin with to get a robot whose whole purpose is just to adore him essentially, why don't we then apply this criticism as well to Eli? Because Eli is doing exactly the same to Patrick essentially. At the point where he got Patrick, he's doing exactly that. He just wants someone who completely adores him, who functions completely like a human. So we either one, say that it's not bad because this robot is not a real human, therefore the harm to their autonomy doesn't exist, or two, we suggest that something is flawed with this person and they just want someone to serve them. Either way, it either all has to be good or none of it is good. We can't have a case where Josh is okay, where Josh is bad, but Eli isn't, because it either has to be, we acknowledge both of them are bad for wanting a partner who just adores them and that's their whole goal, or neither of them are bad because they're picking robots whose whole purpose is to do that. The movie, however, constantly treats it as though Eli and Patrick's love is actually really special and loving and caring, and the fact that Eli doesn't treat him as though he's just a robot makes it better. Again, this completely neglects the point of why do we even think this abuse is bad? If we talk about the fact of the societal critique that's very clearly supposed to be interpreted from this movie, we're supposed to imagine a situation where these two people aren't merely robots, but are humans, right, that just are solely fixated on loving their partner and adoring them. If that is the case, Eli is still really bad for wanting a partner and reinforcing to his partner by deciding to buy him in the first place the idea that he should be his whole goal. This movie kind of acts as though if you abuse your partner, but you actually love them while doing it, it makes it okay. Which to me is quite a terrible and toxic thing to reinforce. And I guess I want to go back a little bit to the point of it being very oversimplified insofar as the critique made by the writing of Josh's character. Whatever you have is such a cartoonishly just bad guy, right? Who, to be honest, in the beginning did not seem that way, was not presented this way. It doesn't quite come off as like, oh, all men or like humans, but generally men in this case, given the fact that it seems like the movie does try to fixate on heterosexual relationships, have within them this notion that women should be subordinate to them. Whenever you present it in such an oversimplified way, where it seems as though Josh always kind of felt these things, and it's only now coming out to us as an audience, as opposed to the idea that Josh has sexism entrenched within him, even in really problematic ways, but just ways that were not really clear. When doing that, any person ever who doesn't just feel to themselves, oh yeah, I think women are just like subordinate and like I deserve better because I'm a guy and I deserve women to serve me, are now no longer criticizing themselves, and nobody even criticizes other people in their life if they don't think like, oh well, under everything this person is this villainous. Once you paint these behaviors as just being these like cartoonish monsters, nobody ever takes away a message about real life as long as they don't believe that the people in their lives or themselves are cartoonish monsters. So to give an example, while a very different movie, a film that I really, really love is a film called How to Have Sex that came out fairly recently. That movie, for example, talks about sexual assault, and in its portrayal, it shows us two scenes of sexual assault that happens to our lead character, where both of these scenes are fairly realistic scenes. The first one is where she has sex with a guy that her and her friends befriend, him and his friends, and we as the audience can see she's very clearly uncomfortable. Beforehand, she didn't know where her friends are, she's a little bit lost, all these things. And it's pretty clear she's very uncomfortable, and the guy she's with is not at all concerned with her well-being during it. The second scene is where later on this same guy decides to have sex with her when she's asleep, with the presupposition that it's okay because they've slept before. So they've slept together before. I think the film presenting these two very realistic scenarios makes it so there actually is a conversation that can come about from it, and the movie very clearly presents to you the ways that this assault affected its lead character. It should make an audience look at this and consider, are these behaviors that I think are normal actually harmful? Do they actually impact people in this way? This movie, though, however, Companion, does no such thing. All the behaviors that are within it are either very cartoonishly evil, and it's clear that the person doing them knows it's evil, or it's behaviors that are still actually just the same amount of evil, but we treat it as okay because the person actually thinks that they love their partner, so it makes it okay. So yeah, I was quite bothered by that, and I feel like the movie, while I think trying to make a good point generally about the bads of just wanting a partner to serve you and not valuing their own autonomy, actually completely undermines its point and seems to not quite recognize why the behavior it's criticizing is even bad to begin with. So, yeah, don't quite know how to end these videos still, so I guess that's it. Bye.